The lullaby that strikes fear in the hearts of the hunted hummed throughout a cold night deep in the woods. It gets closer, louder, your heart starts racing and adrenaline courses throughout your veins. You try to escape, but the lullaby sounds like it's coming from all directions. Just then, in the night sky, you see the outline of a tall figure with a mask. The lullaby stops. You are paralyzed with fear, and before you even know what's happened, a hatchet flies through the air and lands in your chest. You only have a few seconds of life left, and as the light leaves your eyes and you stumble to the ground, that dark figure that was off in the distance is now right on top of you, and the lullaby repeats. Hey everybody, Jeppe here, and today we're taking a look at everything I could find on the Huntress's brutal lore found here in Dead by Daylight. She wasn't always a murdering maniac that preyed on people in the Red Forest outside of what would later be nearby Chernobyl within the collapsing Russian Empire, and we'll see what makes her snap from a normal child to a cold-blooded killer later in life. We'll also see how it may or may not even be her fault at all. So let's get right into the lore of A Lullaby for the Dark, the Huntress. But before we do, real quick guys, this is my first Dead by Daylight video I've ever made, so it would mean the world to me if you showed some amazing support for this video by leaving a like, and let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more Dead by Daylight lore videos in the future. I've really been enjoying this game a ton lately, so I would love to make content on it, but only if you guys like watching these videos. Okay, now with all that out of the way, let's really get into the Huntress lore. Okay, so the Huntress's real name is Anna. Yup, just Anna, and that's all we get in her lore. But if we translate her name to Russian, it actually reads Aha, or bear, which you'll see later on how this is so fitting for her name. Now, like I said earlier, Anna wasn't always a hatchet-wielding cannibal that cut down entire villages of people and squads of soldiers with ease. Her life started off with a tragedy as we find out that Anna's father was killed by soldiers very early in Anna's life. Now, from what I've read, it's been hinted at that it may have been either Russian soldiers or German soldiers pre-World War I era that butchered her father, as Anna remembered her mother reading a book to her when she was very young, as her mom pointed out pictures of soldiers. More on that later. So Anna was pretty much single-handedly raised by her mother, which will be the catalyst of her descent into madness later. Now, for some strange reason, instead of living a normal life in a village or town, working normal jobs, Anna's mother preferred to live in a sturdy cabin meant to endure the unforgiving and harsh winters in a desolate part in the northern Red Forest. Life would be, honestly, very challenging and exhausting for Anna. Pretty much as soon as she could walk, her mother started teaching her how to hunt and survive in the harsh lands which they lived. These northern woods were so extremely remote that only the most keen hunters could survive on their own. So that's exactly what her mother taught her, learning how to skillfully hunt and gather things to survive on during the day, and when the sun started to set and the night fell upon the forest, retreated back to the cabin and stayed warm by the fire, nestled in her mother's arms. Anna loved her mother. She's quite literally the only person she knows and interacts with. Her mom would craft a few small wooden toys and masks of animals to wear, trying to keep her daughter happy. Anna, curled up in her mother's arms, would listen to her heartbeat as her mother hummed Anna's favorite lullaby every night, drifting off to sleep by the warmth of the fire. Interesting fact for you guys, the famous lullaby you hear the Huntress sing in Dead by Daylight is actually based off a real-life lullaby sung by Russian families called the Bayushki Bayu, and the lyrics warned children to not sleep too close to the edges of their beds at night because a wolf would come into their room and snatch their foot, dragging them away if they did. Okay, that sounds like a terrible bedtime story, and one I'm very happy my mom didn't hum to me when I was like 4 years old trying to sleep, because that would be terrifying. This particular winter for Anna and her mother was very harsh. The food was scarce. They kept on having to go farther and farther away from their cabin to find any. It was cold and they were hungry. The sensation of slowly starving to death outweighed any danger on hunting more ferocious animals than normal. So when Anna's mother found the heavy imprint of a big creature in the snow, they took off to find where the tracks led to. That's when they found it. a massive elk locked eyes with Anna and charged at her. Anna, only being probably around 5 or 6 years old, was paralyzed in fear as the elk charged and the pounding hooves got closer and closer. Just then, Anna's mother threw herself in front of the elk just barely before reaching Anna, as the elk's great antlers impaled her mother in many places in her body. She let out a blood-curdling scream as every impalement bled profusely when the elk reared its head, lifting her mother in the air. She had just barely enough strength left in her starving body to slam the axe down on the elk's head over and over again until the elk's antlers snapped, trying to shake her mother loose. Her mom fell to the ground as the elk withered in pain. The beast collapsed. Anna, now gaining control of her limbs again, crawled up to her bleeding and dying mother. Anna was too small to move her mother's broken body, so she sat with her in the clearing where she had fallen. To distract her from the dying elk's cries, Anna's mother held her and hummed her favorite lullaby. They stayed like that, the huntress and the elk getting quieter and colder, until Anna was alone in the silent forest. Enough time would pass, Anna would stand up, look around at what happened, and went off on the long walk back home. Now, there's this part where a lot of people in the Dead by Daylight community believe that Anna's murderous rampage isn't necessarily her fault. She was just a small child, and with no one in her life now, all she knows is how to survive by hunting in the frozen wilderness, and her teachings that her mother ingrained in her. She never really gained any more intellect on how to properly function as a human being from this point on. She was on her own now and had to resort to instincts. Her mind would slowly, over time, represent more of an animal than a human's. As she got older and stronger, she would perfect her hunt, becoming a predator of the day and the night. She would move on from smaller animals like squirrels, hares, and minks to the apex predators of the forest like wolves and bears. Anna was now the top of the food chain and the apex predator for the forest, the huntress. But not only would she hunt these dangerous animals, she would find a new favorite creature to hunt and eat: her taste for humans. It's sickening, but humans who stumbled into Anna's territory were now her favorite prey, slaughtered like any other animal. Anna would often collect the colorful and shiny things these humans would wear, like rings, necklaces, and pieces of clothing, as she's never had any of these things. You can actually see a ring on her hand pictured here that she likely took off a person she killed. Kinda creepy. She likes shiny things, but she really enjoyed taking toys whenever any families would be walking around in the woods. One thing Anna could never do, though, was kill the little girls from any families. It was almost like she wanted to be a mother or had motherly instincts for the little girls, as she'd take them and bring them back to her cabin. She'd call them her little Pushka, and she craved to have a child of her own. Trying to please these little girls, she would steal from her families with all the little toys she would collect or make, the dolls, or the books her mother had that Anna could not read. Of course, the children would be terrified, but Anna could not see that. With her childlike intellect, she thought that she had to protect them from the dangerous outside world by tying a crude rope around their neck and anchor it to a sturdy wall to keep them safe inside. But every single time she would take a little girl, they would wither away and die. She couldn't comprehend in her animal-like mind that they needed to eat food as well, which is strange to me because a ton of animals in the animal kingdom nurture and care for their young. But somehow in Anna's mind, that did not occur to her, so they would just starve and die. She would be devastated, as it would rip her heart apart each time as her new, albeit stolen, daughter would die. Each time it would plunge her deeper and deeper into a sorrow and madness. Craving to be a mother that she desperately wanted to be, she would raid nearby villages, slaughtering families and stealing the little girls to have another child. Anna started wearing the old animal masks her mother made so many years ago now, and tried to calm the small children, but it would never work. Obviously, she's terrifying. The locals around the villages spread rumors and legends of a half-beast lurking in the red forest that would kill families and eat little girls. Of course, we know Anna wasn't eating them, just trying to care for them in her small mind. but to the townspeople, she was a monster. Eventually, the Great War found its way to the Red Forest, Anna's territory. The Great War I'm referring to is World War I, as the German soldiers advanced upon the now collapsing Russian Empire's lands. That meant that no travelers would wander in the woods anymore, and every nearby villager evacuated to avoid the soldiers. In turn, that meant that there were no more little girls to take anymore, just soldiers. The Huntress lived up to her reputation and legend, as squads of soldiers would be found with gaping wounds and lacerations across their bodies. Waves of German and Russian soldiers would be killed by the Huntress for crossing her territory, whole groups disappearing. Anna would stalk and watch these soldiers during the day and at night, watching how the Russian and German soldiers would act to each other and their captured prisoners of war, how each side would torture and kill the prisoner soldiers from the other side just as harshly. For example, it really confused Anna as she was stalking the Russian soldiers' camp one night as they lit a fire underneath a tied-up German soldier just for amusement. Anna was confused, thinking to herself, you kill the game before you roast it. But then she understood what they were doing. It was just for fun. So Anna tried her best to fight back laughter, as she found it very amusing to listen to the squeals of pain, crying and begging to stop of the German soldier to put out the fire lit underneath him. But then she noticed that one of the Russian soldiers had a doll that she desperately wanted for her babushka back at her cabin home, aka the child that she stole. And she was going to have that perfect gift of a doll that oddly reminded her of her father. When one of the Russian soldiers spotted Anna stalking the camp, he lunged at her with his bayonet, but Anna evaded the attack and grabs the pathetic and scrawny man by the neck and curls her calloused fingers around the front of his neck and rips his throat out, dropping to the floor. After a while, the other soldiers went out looking for their comrade and found his body. Terrified of what they saw happen to him, they sent out trying to kill Anna. But her being more animal than human now and living off these lands for her entire life, she had the upper hand, slicing them apart with her axe and luring them to her. It was a slaughter. With each soldier killed, she searched for that little doll she saw one of them holding to give to her babushka back home. The soldiers, realizing they were no match for the Huntress, retreated back to camp where they felt safer in numbers, but were also deathly terrified at all times. And Anna knew this. She would wake up in the middle of the night, head to their camp, and sing her lullaby deep in the woods to wake up and scare all the soldiers. She would leave, come back a few hours later, sing her lullaby again. They'd all wake up again, startled and afraid to go back to sleep. She did this for a few nights in a row, completely depriving them of sleep, whatever advantage she could get, because she was vastly outnumbered by these soldiers. Then she went in for her attack. Sitting next to the starving girl, Anna feels like she's a good mother, but little does she know that within a few days, this little girl right here will no longer be alive, withering away from starvation or sickness. After the war to end all wars was over, no one neared the forest anymore. The legends of the lullaby singing Huntress that roamed the Red Forest faded away. engulfed by the darkness. No one would ever see the Huntress again. It's heavily implied in her lore that once World War I was over, the entity claimed Anna and brought her to its realm. It also looks like that Anna didn't put up much of a fight to be a killer in the entity's trials. Either she wanted to hunt humans again, aka the survivors that we play as, or she was easily tricked into the entity's trials because of her very small animal-like mind. We can see this as there's not much damage done to her body from the entity. Typically when a killer has many scars or damage done to their body, it was because the killer didn't want to hunt people in the trials. But after years of torture from the entity, the killer finally agrees. We can see this in the Trapper's lore, where he gets signs of torture all over his body. That's because it took a long time for him to agree to the trials via torture from the entity. But not Anna. She's just dirty from living in the wilderness her entire life. So it's safe to say that the Huntress was taken by the entity probably in the year 1918 when the war was over, or very shortly after that, to play in the entity's game of hunting the survivors in these trials, in the ever-going threat to feed off the emotions of these survivors to make the entity more powerful, with the eventual goal to take over our world. Well guys, what did you think about the Huntress's lore? Would you like to see more Dead by Daylight videos? And let me know if you'd like a video covering what little we know about the entity. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe notifications if you're new. Now with all that being said, Jippy!